Well, I truly love my acronyms. So in this mentoring session, I'm going to walk you through 5 of the most valuable acronyms for everyday heroism. And let's get right into the first one. It's OAD, an obsessive attention to detail. We live in a world where many producers and work are card-carrying members of the cult of mediocrity. What I'm observing in business today around the world is the collective mediocritization of performance. It's like the standards have become so low. So many people have checked out. They've become cyber zombies. Not so many people are like in the days of past where people were apprenticed to great masters and they would study their craft. That's why here in Rome, as I shoot this mentoring session for you, what I love about Rome is, there are families that all they did was make boots. There are families that specialized in a certain type of burrata cheese, let's say from Puglia. There are families that produce with great love and great enthusiasm and passion. The mozzarella di bufala from Campania. And so what I wanted to remind you is OAD. It means an obsessive attention to detail. There is a great, what I call a GCA, a gargantuan competitive advantage for you to be one of those few people in this world right now who do things with such calibration, such attention to detail, such conviction, such passion. You literally are not in the business you think you're in. You are literally in the magic business. Could you imagine that? Someone says, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm in the magic business. Because the release of magic into your marketplace is what allows you to dominate your domain. And one of the ways to create magic is in a world where people just push out minimum viable product. You say, you know what, this has to be fantastic. The attention to detail has to be perfect. And last night I went into one of my favorite restaurants in the world with 2 people that I love, and we had a wonderful meal, and the service was so impeccable. The timing of the food delivered to the table was flawless. The quality of the food was absolutely amazing. The way the table was set, the orientation of the fork and knife was done with great intention. The music was just right. The user experience was perfect. And so please remember the first acronym of Everyday Heroism, which is OAD, an obsessive attention to detail. What makes mastery is sweating the tiniest of details. And to have the results that only 5% of the population enjoys, you really have to think, feel, behave, and operate as 95% of people are unwilling to behave. Which brings me to acronym number 2, which is NSI, Never Stop Improving. So it's really easy to coast. It's really easy to get into habitual patterns of operating. And I guess what I'd suggest to you is really easy to fall into negative ways of doing things, because they're so easy. And a great life is nothing more than a series of amazing habits done consistently over time that creates a tsunami or a revolution of mastery. And a mediocre life and a life of difficulty and frustration and apathy and disappointment and low energy and very tiny productivity is a life of small little acts of neglect and uncaring that were practiced consistently over time, which led to a life where the person said at the very end, I'm heartbroken because I didn't live my potential and my promise. And so NSI is really important. Be someone, and here's how I encourage you to think about it. Every day, how can I leave everything I touch better than I found it? Every day, how can I leave every person that I meet better than I found it? Like, develop an obsession by practice so that it becomes automatic, where it's like you're always about leaving everything better. Leave every day better than yesterday. Leave this world better than you found it. Which brings me to acronym number 3, which is ABL, always be learning. When I mentor the heavyweights, when I mentor the superstars, the great ones all have one thing in common. They carry books around, or they're always listening to audiobooks. They have you can just tell they're always listening to audiobooks. When they're in their cars, they are members of commuter university, or when they're on the train or on the subway into the city from their farmhouse, They're always using that time not to sleep, not to zone out, not to play with their devices, not to stare at the ceiling. They're using that time to learn. Because when you learn, did you know that it releases dopamine? It gives you more energy. When you learn, it gives you another piece of data which allows you to add more value to the marketplace. When you learn, you increase your skills. And by increasing your skills and making yourself bigger and stronger and more of who you're meant to be, you can be more of service. You can bring more knowledge. You can produce more magic for your customers, which means you become dominant in your industry. People fall in love with you in your industry. They wouldn't consider doing business with anyone else, which creates the currency of money as well as applause. Okay, that brings me to the fourth acronym, ABDOV. I want you to say that right now, ABDOV. And that's always be delivering outrageous value, which is really about under-promising and over-delivering, but always be delivering outrageous value. In a world where most people just mail it in a world where so many people in business, they're phoning it in. They're not looking for the best food if it's a restaurant, the finest food, the freshest food. They're not making sure the tablecloths are absolutely flawless every time. I mean, I think as I'm sharing this or offering this mentoring session to you, I think of Ferran Adrià, who used to run the number one restaurant in the world. It was called El Bulli. And for a period of years while that restaurant was open, I believe they would receive something like 1 million requests that they had to turn down. I think they had a waiting list of millions of people. And he wrote a book about El Bulli. And the meticulousness and the love they put into the dining experience every night, and the care and the mastery of the craft of food preparation, like just the attention to detail and the richness and the value they delivered caused people around the world to come to El Bulli and fall in love with it. And another thing I love about Ferran Adrià as a chef and as a magic worker is at the height and peak of his powers. And while El Bulli was the most famous restaurant in the world, he'd not only close it, I think, for half a year so he could go explore and learn and innovate and come back with fresher ideas that made the restaurant even better. But at the height of its success, he closed it. He said, I did what I wanted to do. I need to do something fresh. To me, that's what the great geniuses do versus keep on repeating their winning formula to the point that they become a caricature of the winning formula. And then the final acronym of the 5 acronyms of Everyday Heroism, this is a big one because resilience and persistency is necessary for legendary. Resilience and persistency is the DNA of legendary. The more risks you take, the more you're going to fail. Failure is the price of ambition. There's nothing wrong with getting knocked down. If you're really taking risks, if you're really playing in the game, if you're really dreaming big, if you're really bringing all your passion to your work and your life, then you're going to have stumbles because you're taking all these wonderful risks. The key is not experiencing risks. The key is not experiencing defeat. Personally, I face defeat all the time. I think one of the great things I want you to keep thinking about is developing this armor plating against rejection, developing this insulation against rejection, because the more times you ask, the more times you try, the more you're going to be rejected. Members of the majority, I'm not disrespecting, I'm just reporting. I'm not judging, I'm just saying. Members of the majority, they get rejected once and they say, ouch, this really hurts. I don't want to do this again. I want you to be rejected 5 times a day because that means you're in the game. If you're not getting rejected a lot, you're not dreaming very big. So the final acronym is KMF, keep moving forward. Get knocked down, keep moving forward. In the Everyday Hero Manifesto, I talk about the Formula One legend, Niki Lauda. I mean, that horrific car crash where he was trapped in the car. It was on fire for almost 60 seconds. I believe it was at the German Grand Prix in 1976. When they pulled him out of the car, one of the onlookers said his face was melting. They took him I believe, by helicopter to a hospital. The people at the hospital looked at Niki Lauda and they called a priest to provide final rites. Niki Lauda himself said, when my wife walked in, she fainted. I knew it was bad. In an interview, he said, I felt like sleeping. I was in that hospital bed. I just felt like going to sleep. But he knew that it wouldn't be an ordinary sleep. It would be the kind of sleep that if he went to sleep, he wouldn't wake up. And yet just 6 weeks after that crash, with bloody bandages on his head and a custom helmet, he put it back on. He got in the car. He was terrified. And he raced in the Italian Grand Prix six weeks later, because while he was in that hospital bed, he said, I'm a competitor. I need to be in the car. And I was so high in the standings. I couldn't stay in this bed, even though he was terrified to get back into the car, which is really what KMF is all about. Get back in the car, get racing as quickly as possible after you've been knocked down. And he placed 4th in the Italian Grand Prix. So those are the 5 acronyms of Everyday Heroism, and I'm really looking forward to having you in the next mentoring session.